Good evening. You've come to those who stayed, a quiet place where forgotten hearts still whisper, and every story is a fragment of someone who once waited, who once loved, and who never left. Tonight, I'll tell you one of their stories. The world outside is a muted wash of gray and green, but here, in the quiet embrace of this room, only one sound truly holds your attention. You are settled deep in a favorite armchair, its plush fabric worn smooth by countless hours of quiet contemplation. You feel its familiar contours support you completely, a gentle and constant presence. The light, drawn low by heavy curtains, casts the room in a perpetual twilight, a soft, forgiving gloom that blurs the sharp edges of the day and invites a sense of deep ease. Your eyes are closed, not in sleep, but in a deliberate act of surrender to the sound that fills the space, the gentle, rhythmic drumming of rain against the window pane. It is not a storm, no violent lashing or furious tempest. It is a soft, persistent whisper that speaks of safety and enclosure. You can picture each droplet, a tiny clear note in a much larger chorus. A chorus that has, for as long as you can remember, ushered in a profound sense of peace. The sound seems to create a protective membrane between this sanctuary and the vast, indifferent expanse beyond. You feel your breathing slow, deepening to match the steady rhythm of the falling water. You notice the cool, clean air on your skin, the comfortable weight of a blanket over your lap, the way your body releases a little more tension with every soft exhale. The sound washes over you, a warm current of sonic comfort that seems to seep into your very bones, cleansing the mind and quieting the anxieties of the day. It is a simple, profound truth whispered by the falling water. Here you are safe. Here you are at rest. Let this memory unfold in its own time. The rhythmic patter carries with it an echo, a resonance that reaches back through the years, stirring a deep, hazy memory from its slumber. The sound of the world being held at bay reminds you of another time, so long ago, when the world itself seemed to stop. Julien remembered the end of movement. It had been weeks, perhaps a month, an eternity measured in the relentless grind of marching feet, the perpetual ache in his calves, the chafing of his wool uniform, the constant, weary creak of leather. Days had bled into nights, each one a repetition of the last. Walk, eat a cold portion of food, sleep fitfully on hard ground, and then walk again. The world had become a blur of motion, a relentless forward impetus, a deafening symphony of boots on cobbled roads, then muddy tracks, then churned earth. His body, once accustomed to the quiet halls of a university, had become a machine, each step an unthinking, automatic response to the collective will of the column. He had forgotten what it felt like to stand still for more than an hour. Then, one hazy afternoon, it stopped. Not a halt for a brief rest, but a profound, definitive cessation. His unit, a ragged line of exhaustion, stood in a chalky field in Flanders. The earth was a pale, almost white color, a barren soil that seemed to drink all the vibrancy from the landscape and the sky. The order came down the line, passed from man to man in a low murmur, not to advance, not to push forward into the unknown, but to dig. The word hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Dig. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. And with that single word, a sudden, profound silence descended. It was not the silence of a quiet forest or a sleeping village. It was the abrupt, almost violent absence of the sounds that had defined his existence for so long. The shuffling of 100 pairs of feet, the rhythmic creak of leather straps, the muttered curses, the distant rumble of transport that had become a constant hum in his ears. All of it vanished. Julien felt the stillness deep in his bones. an alien sensation that was both unnerving and strangely liberating. It was as if the world had suddenly held its breath, waiting. This profound quiet was more unsettling than any noise, for it signaled an unknown, a new kind of stasis. The first sound of this new life was not the roar of a gun or the cry of a man, but the scrape and thud of shovels biting into the earth. It was a primal, insistent rhythm, a counterpoint to the hollow silence. Each metallic scrape against stone, each dull thud of displaced soil. It was a declaration. We are here. We are making a place for ourselves. The memory focuses on this sensory shift. The air, once filled with the metallic tang of sweat and marching dust, now carried the rich, earthy smell of overturned soil, of crushed wild grasses releasing their final, verdant breath. He saw his comrades' faces, etched with an exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue, but also with a grim, determined focus. And Julien felt his own body, finally at rest from the ceaseless march, yet tasked with this new, demanding purpose. The weight of the shovel in his hands was a new kind of burden, but also a grounding force, connecting him directly to the pale, waiting earth. That feeling of being grounded, of the world shrinking to the simple physical task at hand, echoes now in the quiet of the room. The memory of the shovel connecting Julien to the earth is not so different from the feeling of your own body, heavy and relaxed, connecting you to the deep comfort of the chair. That moment in the chalky field, so long ago, was not an end, but the beginning of learning a new way to be. It was the first lesson in finding peace within confinement, in creating a sanctuary where none existed. A deep calm settles over you now, a quiet understanding that mirrors the stillness that fell over that field. The rain continues its soft, hypnotic rhythm outside the window, a steady, comforting presence. And in the quiet of the room, you can almost hear the soft, rhythmic scrape of earth, a sound that was not an end, but a beginning. You remain settled deep in your armchair, a quiet island in the dimly lit room. Your breathing is slow and even, in perfect time with the gentle drumming of the water against the glass. The world outside is a wash of deep blues and charcoal gray, but here, there is only the soft glow of a single lamp and the profound comfort of stillness. Your hand rests on the arm of the chair, your fingers tracing the smooth, worn surface of the wood. It is a beautiful piece, crafted from dark, lustrous cherry, polished to a deep sheen by decades of quiet use. You let your fingertips drift over its surface, feeling the subtle, almost imperceptible grain beneath the polish. The sensation is immediate and grounding. The warmth of the wood, a living material that seems to hold a faint, dormant heat, an echo of the sun and the earth from which it grew. Your skin registers the slightest imperfections, the faint undulations of the grain that speak of its history, a testament to the tree it once was, and the hands that shaped it. It is smooth, yet not entirely uniform, a quiet reminder of its organic origin. This physical connection, this silent dialogue between your hand and the crafted object, feels deeply peaceful, a simple anchor in the quiet flow of the evening. You're not recreating, you're remembering through feeling. This feeling of the wood, solid and real beneath your palm, brings back the memory of rougher timber and of hands that were not yet calloused. The perspective shifts, the present moment receding like a gentle tide, replaced by the stark, visceral reality of the past. Julien remembered the work of building their new world. His hands, once accustomed to the smooth, cool paper of books, to the delicate turning of pages, to the precise and thoughtful grip of a pen. Those hands were now raw and sore. The skin was abraded, the fingernails caked with pale, chalky mud, the knuckles swollen and bruised from the unaccustomed labor of the shovel. The transformation had been swift, a stark lesson in the demands of this new existence, a language spoken not in words, but in aches and blisters. The memory unfolds as a slow, detailed montage of construction, a series of vignettes etched into his mind by sheer repetition and physical effort. The trench walls, initially just raw earth, needed shoring up to hold back the damp, heavy soil. Logs, often scavenged or brought up with immense difficulty from a shattered copse nearby, became their building blocks. Julien recalled with perfect clarity the sharp, clean, resinous scent of newly cut pine. It was a surprisingly fresh and vital aroma amidst the pervasive damp and the metallic tang of stale air. The scent was a fleeting reminder of silent forests, of high branches reaching for the sun, a brief olfactory escape from the confines of the earth. He remembered the feel of the rough bark against his palms, the sticky sap that clung to his fingers, a stubborn, fragrant glue. He remembered the immense, surprising weight of the timber as he and his comrades struggled to maneuver the logs into place, their shared grunts and strained breathing, the only sounds in the world. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. Then there was the earth itself, the very medium of their new existence. The gritty, chalky texture of the soil was a constant presence. Sometimes it was loose and crumbling, sliding away from the shovel in a dry whisper. Other times, after a rain, it became a thick, clinging paste that doubled the weight of every shovelful. It was beneath his feet, on his uniform, in his hair, under his nails. The shovel became an extension of his arm, its wooden handle worn smooth by his grip, its metal blade a familiar, heavy companion. He learned the rhythm of the work, the downward thrust, the satisfying bite into the earth, the heave of his shoulders and back, the turn of his torso, the release of the soil onto the growing parapet. Each movement was a testament to effort, to the simple, profound act of creating shelter. He remembered the collaborative rhythm of the work, a language without words that bound them together more tightly than any order. The scrape of shovels against stone, the dull thud as earth was flung aside, the grunts of exertion that became a kind of percussive beat. It was a symphony of shared labor, each man contributing to the collective effort. One would dig, another would steady a log, a third would pack the earth around it with the flat of his spade. They moved with an unspoken understanding, a synchronicity born of necessity and mutual dependence. There was a quiet camaraderie in the shared ache of muscles, in the knowing glances exchanged over a particularly stubborn root or a heavy stone. Julien remembered looking at the finished dugout, the small subterranean chamber they had carved out of the earth. It wasn't a fortress, no grand bastion of defense, but something far more primal, a burrow, a primitive but essential shelter, a womb of earth and wood where they could escape the elements and the ever-present threat. He ran a hand over one of the pine supports, feeling the rough splinters, the beads of sticky resin that still oozed from the fresh cuts. It was crude, imperfect, but it was theirs. And in that moment, despite the exhaustion that made his bones feel like lead, despite the rawness of his hands, he felt a strange, profound sense of accomplishment. This was the first thing he had built with his own hands, not with words or ideas, but with brute force and simple materials. It was a tangible mark of his presence, a testament to his will to survive, to create. The memory dissolves, the rough timber and chalky earth fading back into the mists of the past, leaving behind only a feeling of quiet strength. You look at your own hands in the soft lamplight, now old and softened by time, the lines on them etched deep like ancient maps. Building that simple dugout, that crude shelter in the earth, had been more than just a physical act. It had been the first step in building an inner one, a mental and emotional refuge. It was the first lesson in how, even in the most desolate of circumstances, one could construct a space of safety, a small corner of peace. The resilience wasn't just in the walls of earth and wood, but in the spirit that raised them. You lean back deeper into the comfortable armchair, feeling the solidness of the wood beneath your hands, a quiet contentment settling over you like the blanket on your lap. The rain outside continues its soft, rhythmic song, and the warmth from the smooth cherry wood seems to travel up your arm, a silent promise of the story yet to unfold. The rain outside has softened to a whisper, a steady, rhythmic hush that insulates this room from the rest of the world. Your breathing is slow and deep, a tide of calm that rises and falls in time with the gentle sounds of the night. Your gaze, having lingered on the familiar grain of the wood, now drifts without effort across the dimly lit space. It comes to rest on a small, unassuming table nearby, its surface polished to a soft sheen that catches the lamplight like still water. Upon the table sits a modest, framed photograph. It is an old image, the sharp edges of the past softened by the gentle passage of years, its sepia tones muted to a delicate whisper of brown and cream. In the photograph, a young woman smiles, a quiet and knowing expression in her eyes that even the distance of decades cannot diminish. You don't feel the need to reach for it, to hold it closer. It is enough to simply observe it from where you sit, letting its presence fill a small, peaceful corner of the room. The lamplight reflects softly on the glass, obscuring a detail here, highlighting a curve of a cheek there. It feels less like an image and more like an impression, a feeling captured under glass. The air in the room is still and comfortable, holding the faint, clean scent of old books and the soft warmth of the lamp. Let this memory unfold in its own time. The face in the photograph, a still and silent portrait, reminds you of something more fluid, more alive. Her handwriting on a page, a voice that traveled from a world away. The present moment softens, its edges blurring as the past rises to meet you, not as a sudden jolt, but as a gentle incoming tide. Julien remembered the day the first mailbag arrived. It was not a grand event. There was no fanfare, no formal announcement. It was simply a quiet ripple of change in the dugout's stagnant air, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that was more felt than heard. A corporal, his face a mask of weary indifference, had dropped a mud-splattered canvas bag onto a makeshift table. The sound was a dull, heavy thud, yet it seemed to silence the low murmurs and the rustle of men shifting in the cramped space. A palpable, yet deeply subdued, excitement spread through the burrow, a strange and fragile thing to witness in men so accustomed to the dull ache of exhaustion. One by one, the corporal called out names, his voice flat as he distributed the precious, travel-worn envelopes. Each name was met with a sharp, quiet intake of breath, a sudden flicker of life in tired eyes. When Julien heard his own name, he felt a jolt that was both startling and deeply welcome. He took the letter, the thin envelope feeling impossibly light and yet profoundly heavy in his calloused hand. He did not open it there. Amidst the quiet sighs of relief and the deeper sighs of disappointment from those who received nothing, he clutched it carefully, a fragile treasure, and retreated to a small niche he had carved out for himself, a corner where the damp earth felt marginally less oppressive, and he could pretend, for a moment, that he was alone. He waited, letting the small sounds of the dugout recede into a background hum. Then he began his ritual. From his pack, he retrieved a precious stub of a candle and, shielding it with his body, carefully lit the wick. The small flame sputtered to life, a tiny, dancing star in the subterranean gloom. Its hesitant glow pushed back the encroaching shadows, making them leap and sway like spectral figures on the rough-hewn walls of earth and timber. The air, thick with the scent of damp soil and stale tobacco, now held the faint, sweet perfume of burning wax. He did not open the letter immediately. First, he simply held it, studying the envelope as if it were a map to a forgotten land. He turned it over and over, his thumb tracing the smudged circle of the postmark, a mark of origin from a distant, peaceful town he could picture so clearly in his mind. He He felt the texture of the paper, slightly coarse and softened by its journey. He imagined the hands that had touched it, the journey it had made across miles of scarred landscape, passed from mail car to dispatch rider to the weary corporal, a small, fragile vessel navigating a sea of chaos, carrying a piece of home within its folded heart. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. With a slowness that felt ceremonial, he carefully broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper. The sight that greeted him was as familiar as his own reflection, his sister Elise's looping, elegant handwriting. It was a script he knew intimately, a hand that had once drawn pictures for him as a child, that had penned countless notes left on the kitchen table. And as he unfolded the page, a faint, almost imperceptible scent wafted from the paper, the clean, comforting aroma of his home, of dried lavender from the linen cupboard and the faint, sweet smell of wood smoke from the hearth. It was the ghost of a scent, a fragile tether to a world that felt more distant than the moon. Her words were not of war, nor of fear, nor of the grim realities that consumed his every waking moment. They were of simple, gentle things. She wrote of the apple harvest, describing the satisfying weight of the fruit in the basket and the sweet smell that filled the kitchen. She told him of a neighbor's ginger cat who had given birth to a litter of kittens in the warmth of the barn. She wrote of the changing color of the leaves on the old oak tree outside their window, how they were turning from vibrant green to the fiery gold of autumn. She wrote of the mundane, the domestic. Julien read the letter slowly, each word a deliberate step back into a world he had almost forgotten how to imagine. Then he read it again, his eyes tracing the familiar loops and curves of her script, savoring each phrase. The contrast between her world and his was a vast, silent chasm. It was, paradoxically, the most vital anchor he could have wished for. It was tangible, undeniable proof that another world still existed. A world of orchards and kittens and changing leaves was still turning, still breathing, waiting for him. The letter was not just paper and ink. It was a window, and through it, a clean, fresh breath of air had just entered his suffocating world. The warmth of that tiny candle flame from so long ago seems to find an echo in the soft, steady glow of the lamp beside you. The feeling the letter gave him, that profound sense of connection, of being held in another's thoughts, settles over you now, a feeling of deep and quiet gratitude. It is the feeling of a lifeline, a thread of light spun across an impossible distance, and the simple, powerful comfort of knowing you are not alone. The memory of her handwriting, a soft and steady presence, remains with you in the quiet of the room, a silent promise of the story still to unfold. The faint, persistent drumming of the rain has finally ceased, leaving behind a profound and gentle stillness. You can feel the absence of the sound as much as you can hear the quiet it has left in its wake. It is a silence that feels full, not empty. A soft, heavy blanket that has settled over the house, muffling the edges of the world and drawing you deeper into the warmth of this chair, this moment. You hold a warm mug of herbal tea cupped in both hands. Its smooth ceramic, a comforting weight in your palms. The gentle heat seeps into your skin, a slow and pleasant tide that travels up your fingers and into your arms, loosening any lingering tension. Your breathing is slow and even, in rhythm with the deep peace of the room. You lift the mug slowly, and the fragrant steam, carrying hints of chamomile and mint, rises to greet you. The first sip is a delicate warmth on your tongue, a soothing balm that traces a gentle path downward. The quiet is so complete that you can hear the softest of sounds, the faint, settled creak of the old house, the whisper of your own breath. It is the kind of quiet that allows the mind to expand, to drift, to settle without effort. The lamplight pools around you, a circle of soft, honeyed gold. leaving the corners of the room in a comfortable, velvety darkness. It feels as though this small island of light is the only place in the world, a safe harbor in a vast and silent ocean. Let the quiet settle around you, like warmth. This comfortable silence, this quiet warmth, evokes a memory, a subtle resonance from a time long past. It is a feeling that calls to its opposite, a reminder of another, very different kind of quiet. A colder, damper silence, shared under a sky that held no stars. The contrast is stark, yet the underlying sense of unspoken communion feels surprisingly, deeply familiar. The present moment softens, the warm room receding as a soft, inward turning begins. This quiet warmth is a world away from the cold, damp silence of a night on watch. Julien remembered his first night watch with Mathieu, an older farmer from a village he'd never heard of, a man whose words were as sparse and carefully chosen as seeds planted in winter. That night, a thick, cold fog had rolled in from the fields, an insidious, creeping shroud that swallowed the landscape whole. It did not arrive with wind, but simply materialized out of the damp air, a silent, gray invasion. The sensory experience was etched into his memory with the clarity of a frost pattern on glass. The dampness was a living thing, clinging to his greatcoat until the wool felt twice its weight, a clammy, heavy presence against his skin. It was a cold breath against his face, a fine, ghostly mist that beaded on his eyelashes and the rough wool of his gloves. The fog devoured the moonlight, transforming the scarred earth into a monochromatic canvas of shifting gray and deeper gray, reducing the world to a radius of only a few feet. And the silence it created was absolute. The distant, rhythmic grumble of artillery, the occasional, nervous pop of a rifle from down the line, the low murmur of sleeping men, all were smothered by the dense, wet air, absorbed into the cotton wool padding of the fog. It created an intimate, enclosed world, just the two of them, huddled together in the narrow cut of the trench. They were two sentinels watching over a world that had vanished, guarding a frontier of pure, soundless gray. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. They did not speak for what felt like hours. There was no need. What words could possibly add to the pervasive chill, the oppressive quiet, the shared, patient vulnerability? Their communication existed in the spaces between words, a subtle language of shared understanding. There was a shared glance, a quick meeting of eyes in the gloom that conveyed everything: vigilance, weariness, and a quiet, profound acknowledgement of the other's presence. A slight nod from Mathieu, a barely perceptible gesture, was a complete sentence, confirming a shared thought. A mutual awareness of the unseen, silent world just beyond their fog-bound bubble. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, with the quiet hum of two minds processing the same stark, simple reality: we are here, together. Then, without a word, Mathieu shifted his weight. The movement was slow, deliberate. He reached into the deep pocket of his greatcoat, and Julien heard the faint scrape of metal, then the soft, dull pop of a cork. Mathieu held out a small, metal flask, a simple, unadorned offering in the gloom. Julien took it, his gloved fingers brushing against Mathieu's. The flask was cold, slick with the dampness of the air. He raised it to his lips, expecting the harsh burn of cheap spirits. Instead, what he tasted was weak, lukewarm coffee. It was bitter and thin, with no hint of sugar, but the warmth of the liquid, however slight, was a profound comfort. It was a small, internal fire lit against the pervasive, external cold, a warmth that spread through his chest and seemed to push back against the dampness that had seeped into his very bones. But more than the coffee itself, it was the simple, silent act of sharing that resonated so deeply. It was a testament to a quiet, unassuming generosity, a simple, human recognition of their shared hardship. The warmth of your tea mug now feels like an echo of that long-ago moment, a physical link to that small, shared comfort. Julien remembered the feeling of that shared presence, the unspoken understanding that they were watching out for each other. Mathieu, stoic and silent, was a bulwark against the vast, formless emptiness of the night. In that fog-bound silence, a connection was forged, not with grand declarations or boisterous laughter, but in the quiet spaces between them, in the shared breath, the shared sip, the shared vigil. It was a bond built on the simple, profound truth that they were not alone. The feeling of that shared warmth lingers with you now, a quiet presence in the still air, a silent testament to a bond forged in the deepest quiet. Your gaze drifts from the now cooling mug in your hands towards the window, where the world outside seems to have been reborn, washed clean and new by the rain. The light that filters through the glass is soft and pale, catching on a million tiny water droplets that cling to the leaves and blades of grass, turning the lawn into a field of muted jewels. The air in the room feels settled, and your breathing is a slow, easy rhythm, a gentle tide rising and falling in the profound stillness. You watch as a small squirrel, a flurry of russet brown fur, darts into view. Its movements are a kind of liquid energy, a seamless flow of instinct and purpose across the emerald expanse. It stops suddenly, a perfect, tiny statue, its dark eyes scanning a world only it can see. Its tail gives a sharp, decisive flick. Then, with a burst of focused activity, it begins to dig, its small paws a blur of motion, sending up tiny sprays of dark, damp earth. You observe its single-minded focus, the way its entire being is consumed by the task of burying its small treasure. It is a creature utterly absorbed in its own world, its own immediate purpose, its own survival. It is completely indifferent to your presence, to the house, to the whole of the human world beyond the window pane. And in that pure, simple indifference, there is a deep and unexpected comfort. Its existence is a clean, straight line, unburdened by the past or the future. You are allowed to simply receive this moment. The sight of this small life, so intent on its own purpose, so perfectly contained within its own world, seems to reach across time, pulling a faint, resonant chord from the depths of memory. The image of the squirrel softens, its edges blurring, and the quiet room around you seems to dissolve, giving way to the damp, earthy shadows of another, much smaller world. The present moment gives way to the past, a silent, gentle pull. Julien remembered the moment he discovered he was not alone in his small, cramped section of the dugout. It had been a fleeting impression at first, a flicker of movement in the perpetual twilight cast by the rough-hewn timbers and the single, guttering candle. He had thought it a trick of his tired eyes, a phantom born of exhaustion, but the impression returned. A rustle in the straw that served as his bedding, a shadow darting across the earthen floor, too quick to be properly seen. He began to watch for it, a silent, patient vigil in the quiet hours. Then, one evening, as he sat hunched over a letter, the mouse appeared. It was emboldened by the stillness, a tiny creature of whiskered nose and bright black bead eyes. It darted from behind a stack of ammunition boxes, snatched a fallen crumb of biscuit, and vanished as quickly as it had arrived. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. Julien was not annoyed. He was captivated. In a world defined by the vast, impersonal machinery of destruction, this tiny, persistent life felt like a profound secret. He began a quiet ritual of observation. He would watch its twitching nose, constantly sampling the air for information he could not comprehend. He noted its quick, decisive movements, its almost comical haste as it secured a prize and retreated to its unseen kingdom in the walls. The mouse was a creature utterly unaware of the war, of the lines on the maps, of the human conflict raging just a few feet above its head. It simply was a small, tenacious life force, driven by the most fundamental and honest of instincts: the search for food, the need for shelter, the simple act of survival. He began a silent conversation with it, an offering. Every night, after finishing his own meager ration, he would break off a tiny piece of the hard biscuit, a piece smaller than his thumbnail, and place it in the same spot near a loose floorboard. He never waited to watch. He would simply leave the offering and turn away, a quiet act of trust. And every morning, without fail, the crumb would be gone. This small, secret communion became a source of profound and unexpected comfort for Julien. The mouse was a constant, tangible reminder of a world that operated on different terms, a world of instinct that had nothing to do with humanity's grand follies. It was a tiny, living refutation of the despair that so often threatened to settle in the damp air. The mouse simply lived. It sought its sustenance. It endured. And in its simple, honest existence, Julien found a quiet joy, an unspoken pact with a creature utterly unconcerned with the tragedy unfolding all around. Your gaze returns to the lawn outside your window. The squirrel has finished its work and vanished. A fleeting memory of motion, a faint, quiet smile touches your lips as you think of that small, living secret. The importance of that connection to a life so simple, so true, so indifferent to the grand madness of men feels clear and warm inside you now. It was a reminder that the world was so much bigger than that small stretch of mud and wire. That life, in its countless forms, persists. It was a quiet anchor, a small, vibrant spark in the overwhelming dark. The warmth of that remembered secret stays with you, a gentle presence in your chest, and this quiet awareness of the world's small, unseen lives settles around you, a soft and steady comfort that breathes with the stillness of the room. You carry this feeling with you as you rise and move through your home, your footsteps making almost no sound on the wooden floor. You find yourself in the kitchen, where the last of the day's light filters through the window, painting the room in soft, gentle tones of gray and gold. The air is cool and calm. Your breathing is an easy, quiet rhythm, a gentle tide rising and falling in the profound stillness. On the counter sits a single, perfect pear. You pick it up, its weight cool and substantial in your palm. The skin is smooth, a delicate, mottled green giving way to a warm, golden blush near the stem. You run your thumb over its surface, feeling the faint texture, the promise of the sweetness held within. With a small knife, you slice a piece, the blade sliding through the flesh with a soft, satisfying whisper. The slice comes away clean, its surface glistening with tiny beads of juice. You lift it, and the faint, fresh scent of the fruit rises to meet you, a clean and simple fragrance. You place the slice of pear in your mouth, and a wave of pure, uncomplicated sweetness washes over your tongue. The texture is soft, almost melting, releasing a cool, fragrant nectar. It is a simple, perfect pleasure, a moment of quiet abundance. You are allowed to simply receive this moment. This simple sweetness, so readily available, so effortlessly enjoyed, seems to pull a faint, resonant chord from the depths of memory. It brings back the feeling of a time when such a taste was not just a pleasure, but a miracle. The soft light of your kitchen seems to dim. The world outside the window dissolves, and you are drawn gently back, pulled by the ghost of a flavor that has never truly left. Julien remembered the taste of the line. It was a taste of monotony. The hard-tacked biscuits, so dense they felt like baked stone, had to be broken apart with care. The tinned beef was a constant, its salty, metallic flavor, a dull necessity that fueled the body but never delighted the senses. Eating was a function, a chore performed in the damp chill of the dugout, a ritual stripped of all joy. The palate grew weary, forgetting the memory of vibrant, fresh flavors, adapting to a world of bland repetition. And yet, even here, Julien found a way to create a small moment of comfort. He would take one of the hard biscuits, break it into his tin mug, and pour the bitter, steaming coffee over the pieces. He would watch patiently as the dark liquid was slowly absorbed, the unyielding hardness giving way, softening, becoming a warm, gentle mush. He would eat it slowly, spoon by careful spoon, focusing not on the taste, but on the simple, profound comfort of the warmth spreading through his chest. It was a small act of defiance, a way of transforming a hardship into a quiet solace. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. But then there was the memory of a sweetness so profound it felt like a dream. Mathieu, the quiet farmer whose presence was a steady comfort, had received a small, battered parcel from home. One evening, as the candle flame flickered, casting long shadows on the damp earth walls, he produced a small, unassuming tin. He said nothing. He never needed to. He took his trench knife and, with a slow, deliberate care, worked at the lid. The scrape of metal on metal was the only sound, a small, focused noise in the immense quiet. Then, with a soft pop, the seal was broken. A scent bloomed in the small space, an aroma so foreign and so beautiful it seemed to stop time. It was the smell of ripe fruit, of sunshine, of sugar, a fragrance from another world, a world they had almost forgotten. Julien leaned closer. Inside the tin, impossibly bright yellow half-moons of peaches floated in a clear, glistening syrup. In the dim, flickering light, they glowed like captured sunlight. The color itself was a shock, a vibrant, joyful declaration of life against the endless drab brown of the trench. Mathieu gestured with the tin, a silent offering. Julien reached in, his fingers dipping into the cool syrup, and lifted out a single slippery piece of fruit. He brought it to his lips. The taste was a revelation. A burst of pure, unadulterated sweetness exploded on his tongue, a sensation so intense and so luxurious, it almost made him dizzy. It was the taste of summer, of orchards, of a life lived in peace. He and Mathieu ate in a shared, reverent silence, passing the tin back and forth. They ate slowly, savoring each piece, making it last. They were not just eating peaches. They were sharing a moment of grace, a reminder that beauty and kindness still existed, a small, perfect taste of humanity in the mud. The memory fades, but the feeling remains, a gentle sweetness that lingers on your tongue. You finish the last of the pear, its clean, fresh taste, a soft echo of that long-ago miracle. That shared tin of peaches was more than just food. It was a communion, a silent acknowledgement of their shared existence, a small, bright light against the overwhelming dark. It was a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature, a feeling of profound contentment that settled deep in your bones. That feeling of quiet, shared grace stays with you now, a gentle presence in your chest. The memory of that unexpected sweetness lingers, a quiet warmth that carries with it the gentle, steady presence of a friend. This warmth is a soft, glowing ember, and you let your awareness rest there in that simple feeling of contentment as your gaze drifts slowly around the room. The world outside the window has softened into a deep, velvety twilight, and the light within your home is gentle and low. Your breathing is an easy, quiet rhythm, a tide that rises and falls with the profound stillness of the evening. Your eyes come to rest on the windowsill. There, in a simple glass vase, stands a single flower. It is a deep crimson rose, its petals just beginning to unfurl from the tight bud. A silent, slow-motion ballet of becoming. The clear glass of the vase catches the dim light, and the water within seems to magnify the deep, rich color of the stem. You watch the way the light touches the soft, velvety texture of the petals, one edge catching a faint gleam. The rest remains in a deep, peaceful shadow. It stands alone, a solitary sentinel of beauty against the cool pane of glass and the fading day beyond. Its form is simple, elegant, and perfect. It asks for nothing, needs nothing. It simply is. The air around it seems stiller, more focused, as if this small, quiet life is the very center of the room's tranquility. You are allowed to simply receive this moment. This single bloom, holding its own against the world, seems to pull a thread of memory from the quiet depths. It reminds you of another flash of red, a different kind of beauty, seen against a landscape of muted brown and gray. The image of the rose on your windowsill dissolves, and you are drawn gently back, not to a taste this time, but to a color that meant everything. Julien remembered a clear, quiet morning. It was a rare gift, a reprieve from the usual damp chill and the low, oppressive sky. A pale, watery sun was climbing. The air was crisp. It carried the clean, metallic scent of distant frost and the ever-present smell of damp earth. He was on duty, but it was a duty of maintenance, not of vigilance. A small section of the trench parapet, the wall of earth and sandbags that faced the enemy line, had crumbled slightly after a recent rain. His task was to rebuild it. He worked slowly, methodically. His movements, a practiced rhythm of effort and focus that required little thought. The scrape of his shovel in the chalky soil was a familiar, almost comforting sound. He would dig into the wet, pale earth, lift a heavy mound, and pat it firmly back into place, shoring up the sagging sandbags, restoring the simple architecture of their burrow. His world had shrunk to this small physical task. The weight of the earth, the grain of the wooden shovel handle in his hands, the cool air on his face. As he worked, his eyes scanning the disturbed ground, he saw it. At first, it was just a splash of color, so unexpected, so out of place. His mind didn't immediately register what it was. He paused, his shovel resting in the mud, and then he saw it clearly, a single bright red poppy. It grew impossibly, defiantly, on the scarred, overturned soil of the parapet itself. Its stem was slender, yet it stood perfectly upright, holding its face to the weak morning sun. The color was a shock, a vivid, vibrant crimson against the pervasive, monotonous palette of browns, grays, and pale chalky white that defined his entire world. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. Julien knelt down, his work forgotten. He looked at the flower, utterly captivated. He saw the impossible vibrancy of the red petals, a hue so rich and full of life it felt like a shout in a silent room. He saw the delicate, paper-thin texture of the bloom, the petals so fragile they seemed to tremble in the still air, and at its center, a small, dark heart, a tiny pool of shadow. The flower was a paradox, blooming in the heart of desolation. It was both incredibly fragile and impossibly strong. A sudden, aching clarity rose in him, a memory from another life, the life of a university student who sat in sunlit libraries. He remembered lines of poetry he had studied, verses about beauty and persistence, about nature's refusal to surrender. In that moment, for Julien, the poppy was not just a flower, it was a symbol, a potent, silent declaration that life, tenacious and beautiful, would find a way to continue. It was a whisper of hope, a promise of renewal, a defiant splash of color against the overwhelming monochrome of his existence. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that he had to tell Elise. He would describe it in his next letter, try to capture the exact shade of red, the way it stood so bravely against the broken earth. He knew she would understand its quiet power. The memory softens, leaving behind not the starkness of the trench, but the gentle, radiant image of the flower. You are back in your room, your gaze still resting on the deep crimson rose. The feeling that remains is one of quiet awe, a warmth that spreads through your chest like a slow sunrise. You reflect that hope is often found not in grand gestures or loud pronouncements, but in the smallest, most unexpected signs of life. It is in the single flower pushing through the cracks, the quiet persistence of beauty in a world that can feel harsh and gray. These small moments, these flashes of color, are the true anchors, the quiet affirmations that life continues its relentless, beautiful journey. The thought of Julien carefully choosing his words, forming the sentences in his mind to share that small moment of grace with his sister, lingers with you. The image of the poppy becomes a message, a silent promise sent across a distance, a connection forged by the simple act of noticing. That feeling of a message about to be written, of a quiet story waiting to be told, hangs softly in the air. As you rest here, held by the deep comfort of your chair, a new sound begins to make itself known. It starts as a whisper, a faint and distant patter, so soft you might almost imagine it, but then it grows, a little more confident, a little more present, a soft tapping on the window pane, a gentle drumming on the roof above. The rain has returned, but this time it is a more settled and persistent presence, a sound that speaks not of a passing shower, but of a long and soothing downpour. You lean your head back, letting the soft velvet of the chair cushion your neck. The sound of the rain fills the space around you, a steady, rhythmic percussion that seems to wrap the entire house in a protective embrace. It is the sound of shelter, the sound of warmth and safety. Each drop that lands on the roof is a note in a long, unbroken lullaby, a rhythm that washes away the day and deepens the quiet of the evening. Your breathing slows to match its steady cadence, a slow and easy tide rising and falling in the peaceful harbor of this room. The low lamplight seems to grow warmer, more golden, in contrast to the cool blue-gray world outside the glass. The air itself feels softer, insulated by the constant, gentle drumming from above. Let the quiet settle around you, like warmth. The sound of rain on a solid roof, a familiar solace, a deep and ancient comfort. And as you listen, that steady rhythm seems to pull a thread from the past, an echo of another roof, another rain, from a time when shelter was a far more fragile yet equally profound blessing. The sound in your room becomes a bridge, and you drift across it gently, without effort, carried by the rhythm of the water. Julien remembered the smell of the air just before the storm. It was a scent he came to cherish, a rare moment of purity in a world defined by the smell of damp earth, stale smoke, and the close proximity of too many weary men. For a few brief moments, a clean, sharp scent of ozone would wash through the trench line, a smell like clean stone after a lightning strike. It was a scent that promised nothing, but delivered a moment of profound freshness, a deep, cleansing breath before the sky would inevitably break, and then the first drops would fall, dark circles appearing on the pale, chalky soil. Then a few more, and soon the drizzle would become a steady sheet, a relentless cascade that turned the world to a shimmering gray curtain. The order was unspoken but immediate. He and his squad mates would retreat into their dugout, a crude burrow carved into the side of the trench. It was little more than a cave, shored up with rough pine timbers and roofed with a large sheet of corrugated iron scavenged from a ruined barn some miles back. As they huddled inside, the world outside dissolved into a torrent of water and mud. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it, the core of the memory. The part that time had polished into a smooth, comforting stone was the sound. The rain on the thin, metallic roof was a deafening, insistent percussion. It was a booming, resonant drumming that vibrated through the very earth beneath them, a sound so loud it seemed to occupy all the space in the world. But it was consistent. It was a steady, unwavering rhythm that drowned out everything else. The distant, unsettling rumble of artillery, the sharp and sudden crack of a rifle, the lonely sigh of the wind across the fields. All of it was erased by the overwhelming, hypnotic beat of the rain. It was the sound of being completely and utterly enclosed. Julien remembered sitting on an ammunition box, his back against the damp earthen wall, watching water trace paths like veins down the rough-hewn timbers. He would listen to that roof drum, that constant, powerful lullaby. The flimsy sheet of iron, their only shield against the deluge, became the source of a strange and profound peace. In that confined space, surrounded by the sleeping forms of his comrades, their breathing a quiet counterpoint to the storm, Julien felt a sense of safety he could find nowhere else. The rain was not an enemy. It was a curtain, a wall of sound that sealed them off from the war, creating a temporary, fragile sanctuary. For as long as the rain fell that hard, the world was still. They were simply men in a small, dark space, listening to a storm, protected and at peace. The memory softens, and the booming drum of the iron roof fades, blending seamlessly with the gentler, more soothing rhythm of the rain on your own roof. The feeling of profound safety from the memory remains, a warm and heavy presence that settles deep within you. It anchors you to this moment, to the feeling of the soft chair supporting you, to the gentle warmth of the air in your quiet room. You reflect on how shelter is more than just walls and a roof. It is a feeling, a sound, a moment of peace carved out of a storm. It is the quiet certainty of being protected, a feeling that allows the body to release its tension and the mind to finally be still. The steady, percussive rhythm of the rain continues its song, a constant and reassuring presence. It is a sound that holds no questions and demands no answers. It simply is. And as you listen, another quality of the sound emerges. It is not just a rhythm, but a kind of music, a simple, steady beat that seems to fill the silence. That gentle, percussive beat lingers in the air, a quiet cadence that begins to stir another memory. A memory not of nature's music, but of a melody made by human hands, drifting across a quiet, moonlit field. The drumming on the roof has softened now, fading from a steady rhythm into a slow, intermittent tapping, like the final sleepy notes of a long lullaby. Soon, even that ceases, leaving behind a profound and settled quiet. The world outside the window is washed clean, holding its breath in the aftermath of the downpour. The air in the room feels thicker, warmer, insulated by the deep stillness that has taken its place. You feel the weight of your own body in the chair, a comforting and solid presence. Your breathing is a slow, easy tide, rising and falling in the peaceful silence. In this deep quiet, your senses expand. You become aware of the faint, almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and clean air drifting from the slightly open window. You notice the soft, golden glow of the lamp, how it pools on the dark wood of the side table and catches the subtle texture of the blanket draped over your lap. And then, another sound emerges from the heart of the stillness. It is the gentle, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall, a soft and steady beat, a quiet, unhurried pulse measuring not the frantic pace of a day, but the peaceful passage of a restful night. It is a sound of continuity, of deep and abiding calm, each tick and each tock a gentle reassurance that all is well. Let this memory unfold in its own time. That faint, rhythmic sound, it recalls a different music, one that crossed a much greater distance. The steady pulse of the clock in the hall seems to dissolve, becoming a bridge to another time, another quiet. The warmth of your room gives way to the memory of a deep and penetrating cold. Julien remembered an impossibly quiet night. The air was so still and cold it seemed to crackle, carrying the sharp metallic tang of frost. It was one of those rare, almost unnerving lulls in the rhythm of the war. For hours, the distant percussive shelling and the sporadic crack of rifles had fallen completely silent. A profound, almost sacred stillness had settled over the landscape, a heavy blanket over the churned earth and tangled wire of no man's land. It was a silence that felt fragile, as if the whole world were holding its breath, waiting. And then, carried on that cold, still air, a new sound began. It was faint at first, a mere whisper of a note, so thin you could mistake it for the wind sighing through a crack in the dugout wall. But there was no wind. The sound grew, gaining a quiet confidence, weaving itself into a simple, melancholy melody. It was the sound of a harmonica. It wasn't a military tune, no rousing march or patriotic anthem. It was a folk song, a simple, searching melody. It seemed to hold all the longing in the world within its gentle, reedy notes. It was a tune that spoke of hearths and harvests, of quiet evenings and sad goodbyes. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. Inside the dugout, the small sounds of life ceased. The low murmur of conversation, the scrape of a boot on the earthen floor, the rustle of a man shifting in his blanket. It all fell away. Julien looked at the faces of his comrades, illuminated by the flickering, greasy light of a single candle. He saw his own quiet astonishment reflected in their wide eyes. They turned their heads as one, not towards the entrance of the dugout, but towards the wall of earth that separated them from the night, as if they could listen through the very soil itself. And with a slow, dawning recognition, they knew the music was drifting from across that frozen, silent expanse. It was coming from the German line, just a few hundred yards away. It was a haunting, achingly human sound. It was not the sound of an enemy, not the sound of the faceless, gray uniform he had been trained to see. It was the sound of a man just like them, huddled in his own burrow of cold earth, seeking a moment of solace in the vast and indifferent darkness. The simple, fragile music floated over the barbed wire and the shell craters, a bridge of pure sound built across a chasm of mud and fear. For those few precious moments, there were no sides, no battle lines, no conflict. There was only the shared, silent act of listening, a moment of communion in the heart of the desolation. No one spoke, no one dared. To make a sound would be to break the spell, to admit the world back in. They simply listened, their weary bodies still, their minds filled with the sad, beautiful notes of a stranger's song. The final, lingering note of the harmonica seems to fade into the quiet of your room, replaced once more by the steady, comforting tick of the clock. The memory of the cold night air dissolves, leaving behind only the gentle warmth that surrounds you now. The feeling of that shared, silent listening remains, a sense of profound, gentle connection. It settles within you, not as a sadness, but as a deep and quiet warmth in your chest, an anchor to the simple, resilient humanity that persists in the most unlikely of places. The steady beat of the clock is no longer just a measure of time, but a quiet heartbeat, a rhythm of peace that echoes that fragile, musical truce from so long ago. The warmth of that connection remains, a silent presence in the room. The echo of that simple folk song seems to hang in the air, a quiet question waiting for an answer. The warmth in your chest is a soft, glowing ember, a testament to that fragile moment of shared humanity. The question it poses is not one of words, but of feeling, a quiet curiosity about how such connections are forged, how they are sustained. Your breathing is a slow and easy rhythm, a gentle tide in the deep ocean of the room's quiet. The air itself feels soft, settled. You notice the way the lamplight does not intrude, but rather rests upon the surfaces of the room, revealing the deep grain of the wooden table, the soft woven texture of the blanket over your lap. Your hand, moving with a slow and unthinking grace, drifts from your side and comes to rest on the cover of a book. It is an old, familiar volume. You can feel the worn texture of the cloth binding beneath your fingertips. the subtle indentations of the title, smoothed by time and touch. You feel the gentle weight of it, a comforting, solid presence. You lift the book into your lap, its spine creaking a soft, papery sigh as it settles. You don't open it just yet, content to simply feel its presence, a vessel of words and worlds held in silent repose. Let this memory unfold in its own time. The thought comes as gently as a breath, words on a page, building a bridge from one mind to another, a conversation across time and space. And as you hold this book, you remember another collection of words, another set of pages that built the most important bridge of all. Julien remembered the feel of the envelope in his hand. It was thin, slightly damp from its long journey, and felt impossibly fragile against his calloused fingers. He had found his usual quiet spot, a small niche carved into the trench wall where the earth was shored up with pine boards. Here, he could press his back against the cool, damp soil and feel, for a few moments, as if he were alone in the world. He had written his last letter to Elise in a state of quiet desperation, taking a risk. He hadn't written about the mud, or the fear, or the endless, grinding weariness. Instead, he had written about the small things he had begun to notice, the tiny anchors that were keeping him tethered to himself. He wrote of the impossible redness of a single poppy growing on the parapet. He wrote of the bold little field mouse who had become his secret companion. And, most hesitantly of all, he wrote of the German harmonica, its sad, beautiful music drifting across the darkness. He had sealed the letter and sent it off, a message in a bottle, half convinced she would think him mad, or that his small observations would seem trivial in the face of such a vast and terrible thing. He feared her pity more than anything. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. He carefully broke the seal. His heart, a slow, heavy drum against his ribs. He unfolded the thin pages, the familiar slant of his sister's handwriting, a balm to his eyes. He began to read, and as he did, a slow, profound wave of relief washed over him, so powerful it felt as though a great weight was being lifted from his very soul. Her letter was not full of fear. It was not filled with pity or misunderstanding. It was filled with a quiet, resonant understanding that went deeper than words. She had received his offerings, and, in return, she sent her own. She did not speak of the war or of her worries for him. Instead, she wrote about the robin that had built a nest in the old rosebush just outside the kitchen window. She described its fierce, protective nature, the way it sang its defiant song to the rising sun each morning. She wrote about the sound of the church bells on a Sunday, how the wind carried their peal across the fields in a particular way, a sound that had been the backdrop to his entire childhood. She described the intricate feathery patterns the frost etched onto the window panes on a cold morning, a delicate, fleeting art that was gone by midday. She was taking his gentle memories and reflecting them back to him. She was building her end of the bridge, using the same materials of quiet observation and gentle beauty. She was helping him build a shared world, a sanctuary of words where they could meet, a place of stillness that no war could touch. He was not alone. He was seen. He read the letter 3 times, letting the words sink into him, each one a drop of clean, cool water on parched ground. Then he folded the pages with immense care, following the original creases, and tucked the letter into the breast pocket of his tunic, a warm, papery shield over his heart. The memory recedes, leaving behind not an echo of cold mud, but the profound warmth of that connection. You feel it now, a gentle heat that seems to radiate from your own chest, spreading through your limbs. Your hands are resting on the cover of the book in your lap, and you feel the warmth there too, as if the story of that letter has soaked into the very object you hold. Elise had understood with a wisdom that went beyond her years. She knew he did not need saving. He needed a partner in the act of seeing. She helped him understand that his focus on the small, persistent life around him was not an escape, but an act of profound resistance. It was a way of remaining human. The weight of the book in your lap feels different now. It is no longer just paper and ink, but a quiet testament to the power of words to build a sanctuary. Your fingers trace the edge of the cover, feeling the smooth, worn fabric. The story of that letter, of that bridge of words, has settled into the quiet of the room, a feeling of deep and abiding gratitude. As you rest here, a subtle shift occurs in the air around you. A slight coolness begins to creep into the room, a gentle reminder of the evening deepening outside your window. It's not an unpleasant chill, but you notice it on the surface of your skin, a faint whisper of the night. Your breathing remains slow and even, a steady rhythm in the stillness. Your eyes, soft and unfocused, notice how the lamplight pools on the floor, making the dark wood glow like honey. With a slow, unhurried movement, you reach for the soft wool blanket folded neatly over the back of your chair. You draw it over your legs, and the change is immediate. First, there is the gentle weight, a comforting, grounding pressure that seems to help you settle even more deeply into your seat. Then there is the texture of the wool, soft and yielding beneath your hand. And finally, a slow, delicious warmth begins to spread, seeping deep into your legs, chasing away that last hint of coolness. Let this memory unfold in its own time. This simple warmth, this profound and uncomplicated comfort, feels like an echo of something distant. You remember a time when the feeling of dry wool was not just a luxury, but a kind of salvation. Julien remembered the arrival of the care package. It was a small, lumpy parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with string that had frayed on its long journey. It felt heavy in his hands, a solid piece of another world. He carried it to his corner of the dugout and sat on a relatively dry plank, the package resting on his knees like a sacred object. He untied the string with fumbling, cold fingers, carefully folding it and placing it in his pocket. He peeled back the paper to reveal the treasures within. There was a small, hard square of dark chocolate, a luxury so profound he could already imagine the bitter, rich taste melting on his tongue. There was a slim volume of poetry he and Elise had both loved, its familiar cover a sight that made his throat tighten. But he knew, somehow, that the true gift was at the very bottom. Beneath the other items, nestled like a secret, were 2 pairs of thick, hand-knit wool socks. His own socks had been damp for so long, he had almost forgotten what it felt like for them to be dry. They were a constant, miserable presence, a cold, clammy second skin that never left him. The dampness had seeped into his bones, a dull, persistent ache that was a permanent feature of his existence. His feet were perpetually numb, the skin wrinkled and pale. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. He took out the new socks. They were a simple, natural cream color, and he could see the slightly uneven stitches, the subtle imperfections that told him more than words ever could. They spoke of hours spent by the fire, of his sister's careful, loving labor, her thoughts woven into every loop of yarn. He lifted one to his face. It smelled faintly of lavender and clean wool, the scent of home, of a life he could barely recall. It was the scent of her care. With slow, deliberate movements, he began the ritual. He pulled off his stiff, wet socks, peeling the cold, rough fabric away from his chilled skin. He took a moment to rub his pale feet, kneading the cold flesh with his numb fingers, trying to coax some life, some circulation back into them. Then he picked up the first dry sock. He opened its woolen mouth and began to guide his foot inside. The sensation was so profound, so utterly and completely blissful. He stopped breathing for a moment. The feeling of the soft, dry, warm wool enveloping his cold skin was a physical revelation. It was an immediate, almost shocking wave of pure comfort. It spread from his toes, across the arch of his foot, around his heel, and up his ankle. A wave of warmth, both physical and metaphorical, began to radiate from his foot, moving up his leg, a slow tide of relief that seemed to chase the deep, settled chill from his entire body. It was more than just comfort. It was a tangible piece of his sister's love, a silent understanding of his most basic, unspoken misery. It was a message, delivered in wool and warmth, that he was seen, that he was remembered. He pulled the second sock on with the same reverence, enclosing his other foot in its own perfect sanctuary of warmth. For a long time, he just sat there, feeling the life seep back into his feet, a quiet internal glow against the external cold. That memory of profound relief recedes, but the feeling remains. You shift your legs slightly under the blanket in your lap, and the soft wool whispers against your skin. You understand, in this quiet moment, that true salvation rarely arrives as a grand, dramatic gesture. It comes in small, practical forms. It comes as a letter that says, "I see you." It comes as a pair of dry socks, so lovingly knit, that says, "I know what you need." It was a more powerful message of hope than any grand words, a quiet testament to the profound power of practical care. The warmth from the blanket seems to have settled deep inside you now, a gentle, steady heat that soothes and calms. Your hands rest upon the soft wool, and the texture beneath your fingers feels like a quiet conversation, a story of care told without a single word. The warmth from the blanket has created a small sanctuary, a pocket of perfect comfort in the cool evening air. Your breathing is slow and deep, each exhalation a soft release, letting you settle further into the deep cushions of the chair. The room is a study in stillness. The lamplight casts long, gentle shadows that soften the edges of the furniture, making the familiar space feel dreamlike and serene. Your gaze drifts, unhurried, across the room. It moves over the dark grain of the wooden floor, the gentle curve of a vase on the mantelpiece, and finally comes to rest on the tall bookshelf that stands against the far wall. Your eyes trace the lines of the book spines, a mosaic of muted colors in the warm light, and there you notice a small break in the pattern. Near the bottom, a single book has slipped from its place, lying slightly askew on the floor, its cover open just a fraction. It is a small, quiet disruption in the otherwise perfect order of the room. For a long moment, you simply observe it. There is no urgency, no need to fix it, but the gentle impulse to set it right begins to stir. With a slow, fluid movement, you fold the blanket to one side and rise from your chair. Your feet are silent on the floorboards as you cross the room. You bend down, your joints moving with an easy grace, and pick up the fallen book. It feels solid and cool in your hands. You close its cover with a soft press of your thumb and slide it back into its empty space on the shelf. It fits perfectly, its spine aligning with its neighbors, restoring the quiet harmony of the row. You run your fingers lightly across the titles, a brief, tactile appreciation for things in their proper place. Let this memory unfold in its own time. This simple act of restoration, of putting something back where it belongs, feels like a distant echo. It calls forth the memory of a much larger, much muddier act of putting things right. You remember the shared, silent work of rebuilding a wall of earth. Julien remembered the smell first. After days of relentless, driving rain, the downpour had finally ceased, leaving behind a world saturated and dripping. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil and chalk, a clean but heavy perfume that clung to everything. And then came the sound, a slow, wet, sucking sigh. It wasn't a crash or a bang, but a weary, gravitational release. A whole section of their trench wall, unable to bear the weight of the waterlogged earth any longer, had given way. It slumped inward in a slow cascade of thick gray mud and splintered pine supports. The men who were nearby simply stepped back, watching it happen with a kind of exhausted patience. There was no panic. The front was quiet. The sky, a uniform sheet of pearl gray. There was only a collective, unspoken understanding. Another task had just been added to the day. Without a word of command, shovels were picked up. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. The work began. It was a slow, arduous ballet of restoration. Julien remembered the feeling of the shovel in his hands, the wood worn smooth but still slick with damp. He drove the blade into the thick, clinging mud. It was not like digging in dry earth. Every shovelful was a fight. The mud created a vacuum, a glutinous suction that resisted, that tried to hold on to the shovel. It made a thick, squelching sound with every pull. He and Mathieu and the others fell into a rhythm. Scrape, lift, horn, heave. The heavy slop of mud being tossed onto a ground sheet to be dealt with later. It was a rhythm punctuated by the deep, guttural grunts of effort. Sounds that were not of anger, but of pure physical exertion. Occasionally, a man would curse under his breath as his boot slipped or a particularly heavy load of mud threatened to overbalance him. But the sound was quickly swallowed by the steady, collaborative noise of the work. Julien watched the others as he worked. He saw the concentration on Mathieu's face. His brow furrowed as he carefully placed a new timber support into the gap. Ensuring it was level and secure, he saw two younger men working in perfect synchrony, clearing the fallen earth, their movements economical and practiced. Their uniforms were caked in mud, their faces streaked with it, but there was a quiet determination in their eyes. They were not fighting an enemy of flesh and blood. They were fighting chaos. They were fighting the slow, steady decay that sought to undermine their small, burrowed world. Every shovelful of mud cleared, every new plank of pine set in place was a small, defiant act of order. They were rebuilding their home. He felt a strange and profound sense of purpose settle over him, a feeling that warmed him from the inside out, chasing away some of the damp chill. This was work that made sense. It had a clear beginning, a difficult middle, and a tangible end. It was the simple, honest labor of making things right again. That feeling of quiet, shared accomplishment lingers, a warmth that has nothing to do with the blanket on your lap, and everything to do with the memory of collective effort. You return to your chair, sinking back into its comfort, and draw the soft wool over your legs once more. The books on the shelf are all in a line, a small, perfect picture of order. You understand that the deep satisfaction Julien felt was not just about rebuilding a wall. It was about the profound comfort found in shared labor, in the simple, rhythmic work of mending a broken piece of your world. Whether it is a fallen book or a collapsed wall of earth, the act of restoration carries its own quiet peace. The memory of the rhythmic scraping of shovels fades, but it leaves behind an echo in the silent room. It is not a sound, but a feeling, a gentle, steady pulse of purpose, a quiet sense of things having been set right again. The warmth remains, a silent promise of more to come. You are here, in this peaceful space, held by the stillness of the evening. The light from the single lamp is very low now, a pool of soft honey that does not push the darkness away so much as it coexists with it. The corners of the room are lost in deep, velvety shadow, and the world outside the window has dissolved into an indistinguishable, tranquil black. Your eyes, now fully accustomed to the dimness, begin to trace the familiar shapes around you. They are not just objects. They are quiet companions. You see the strong, straight line of the bookshelf against the wall. Its form, a solid, reassuring presence in the gloom. Its rows of books are a silent testament to stories and to time. Your gaze drifts to the soft, rounded curve of the armchair opposite you. its empty cushions holding the gentle impression of rest. You see the solid, low rectangle of the old wooden chest, its surface worn smooth by years of touch. These are the outlines of your peaceful world, things that hold their place with a simple, unwavering stillness. And in observing them, you become aware of the profound difference between the quiet existence of things and the ever-shifting inner world of a person. An object simply is. A person feels and remembers and dreams. To truly see an object is to notice its form and texture. To truly see a person is an act of quiet revelation, a glimpse into the gentle mystery of their being. Let the scene come to you slowly, without effort. This simple act of seeing, of truly noticing the world around you in the quiet dimness, is what calls the memory forward. It was another time, another quiet darkness, when the act of seeing was a way of holding on to something precious. You remember Julien and his desire to see a friend's face, not by the clear light of day, but by the hesitant flickering light of a single candle. Julien remembered the quiet. It was a rare and fragile thing, a silence that felt deeper than just an absence of noise. It was a lull, a moment when the weary world outside their small burrow seemed to be holding its breath. He had been tidying his small collection of personal effects when his fingers brushed against it. A small, forgotten stub of a charcoal pencil tucked into the seam of his pack, and by some other small miracle, he had also saved a scrap of the rough, brown packing paper that had once wrapped a parcel from home. It was brittle and creased, but one side was clean enough. Across the dugout, which was little more than a hollowed-out space shored up with pine, Mathieu was asleep. His friend, the quiet farmer who spoke more with his hands and his eyes than with his mouth. He was utterly given over to exhaustion. His head rested at an awkward angle on his pack, his body slumped, his tunic rumpled. He was a portrait of profound weariness. In the center of their small space, a single candle burned on an overturned crate, its small flame dancing with the drafts, casting shifting, liquid shadows on the rough-hewn walls. In that flickering light, Julien felt an irresistible urge. It was not the ambition of an artist. It was the simple, human need to see. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. He moved quietly, settling himself with the paper braced against his knee. He didn't want to capture a perfect likeness. He wanted to understand, to witness the man who existed beneath the mud-caked uniform and the stoic silence. He studied Mathieu's face, illuminated by the hesitant glow. The candlelight was a gentle editor, softening some details while deepening others. Julien saw the lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, the deep furrows in his brow that didn't quite disappear even in sleep. He saw the faint tension in his shoulders that spoke of endless vigilance, but he also saw things that the harsh light of day often concealed. He saw the profound peace in his friend's slackened jaw, the gentle, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. He saw the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, a quiet engine of life in the deep stillness of the earth. It was a face stripped bare of the masks they all wore to survive the day. It was a face of quiet dignity, of an enduring humanity that no war could erase. The air in the dugout was thick with the scent of damp soil and the faint, sweet smell of melting candle wax. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic whisper of Mathieu's breathing, and now a new sound, the delicate, dusty scratching of the charcoal on the rough paper. It was a tiny, creative sound in a world built for destruction. The flame flickered. The shadows moved across Mathieu's face like water, deepening the hollow of a cheek, then highlighting the bridge of his nose. With each soft stroke, Julien felt he was engaging in a silent communion, a quiet act of intimacy and profound respect. He was seeing his friend, truly seeing him, and in doing so, he was affirming that they were still men, not just soldiers. The memory ends with Julien leaning back, looking at the finished sketch. It was crude, lacking any real artistic finesse, but it was honest. It had captured the essence of the sleeping man, the quiet strength and the profound peace of a soul finally, truly at rest. The warmth of that quiet, candlelit moment seems to fill the room around you now. It is a feeling of deep and uncomplicated affection, a warmth that emanates from your own chest and spreads gently through your limbs, more comforting than any blanket. It is the warmth of connection, of recognizing the humanity in another and having your own humanity recognized in return. It was a way of saying, without a single word, "I see you." You feel the deep, quiet affection for friends both past and present, a connection that needs no words. And in the stillness of the room, you can almost feel the faint, dusty trace of charcoal, the memory of a single, gentle line drawn in the dark. The air in the room is cool and quiet, holding a profound peace. Your breathing is slow and even, a soft, rhythmic tide rising and falling in the tranquil space. You feel the gentle weight of the blanket over you, a comforting pressure that grounds you in this moment of perfect rest. Your gaze drifts towards the window, a dark rectangle set against the wall. For a long while, it is just an absence of light, a portal to a sleeping world. Then, a soft glow appears in the distance. Across the way, a neighbor's porch light has come on. It isn't a harsh or sudden light, but a gentle, golden bloom in the darkness, a small and friendly beacon. It is a quiet signal of presence, a silent message that you are not alone in the night. It speaks of a shared human space, of lives continuing peacefully behind closed doors, of the simple, unspoken understandings that connect us all. Let the scene come to you slowly, without effort. This small, distant light, a simple gesture of illumination against the dark, calls forward the memory of another signal, a signal that traveled not across a quiet street, but across a scarred and broken landscape, carrying with it a message of profound and unexpected peace. The present scene softens, and you remember Julien, standing watch in the hushed moments just before the dawn. Julien remembered how the music had become a part of their lives. The sound of the distant harmonica drifting from the German line was no longer a surprise. It had become a fragile, unspoken ritual. On the quietest nights, its melancholy folk songs would rise into the air, a thin, ethereal thread of sound weaving its way across the desolate expanse of no man's land. The men in Julien's trench would stop what they were doing. Their conversations would fall silent, and they would simply listen. It was a sound that reminded them that on the other side of the mud and wire there were also men who felt the cold, who missed their homes, and who found solace in the simple notes of a familiar tune. It was a truce made of sound, a brief, invisible bridge built across an impossible divide. Then, one quiet morning, something new happened, something tangible. Julien was on watch, his eyes scanning the familiar broken horizon. A cold mist clung to the ground, softening the sharp edges of shell craters, wrapping the tangled skeletons of barbed wire in a soft gray shroud. The world was hushed, holding its breath in the pale pre-dawn light. It was in this profound stillness that he saw it, a small, dark object, arcing gracefully through the air from the other trench. His body tensed for a moment, a conditioned reflex, but his mind knew this was different. The arc was too high, too slow. It was not a weapon. It sailed in a silent, deliberate curve, a fragile projectile of unknown intent. Before landing with a soft thud in the churned mud a few dozen yards from their parapet, you don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. A quiet curiosity rippled through the section of the trench. Men who had been sleeping stirred and woke. No one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the small, dark shape half buried in the earth. A long time passed, the silence filled only by the distant caw of a crow and the unspoken questions that hung in the cold air. Was it a trick? A message? A mistake? The tension was not one of fear, but of a deep and fragile hope, stretched taut against years of ingrained suspicion. Finally, a man from a neighboring section, a farmer named Corporal Dubois, who was known for his quiet courage, made a decision. With slow, deliberate movements, he slid over the parapet and began to crawl on his belly through the mud, moving towards the object. He was a dark shape against the gray earth, his progress painstakingly slow, each movement careful and considered. The entire trench held its breath, watching him. He reached the package, paused for a moment, and then began his slow journey back, clutching his discovery. He slid back into the trench, mud splattered but unharmed. In his hand was a small, crudely wrapped packet. It was German tobacco, tied with a bit of string. Tucked into the string was a folded piece of paper. The note was written in hesitant, almost childlike English, its precise words long since faded from Julien's memory. But the message itself was unforgettable. It was not the words that mattered. It was the act, a tangible gift, a gesture of shared humanity that spoke of a mutual weariness, a common suffering that transcended uniforms and languages. It was the beginning of a small, localized, and completely unofficial truce, built not on orders from generals, but on a shared love for a simple song and a shared misery in the cold. The memory of that small offering of peace dissolves, and your awareness returns to the quiet comfort of your room. Outside, the neighbor's porch light continues its steady, gentle glow. It is no longer just a light. It feels like a continuation of that same gesture, a silent acknowledgement of shared space, of quiet connection across the darkness. A feeling of gentle hope, warm and soft, settles in your chest. It is the warmth of knowing that peace does not always arrive with grand pronouncements. Sometimes it begins with a single, quiet gesture, a shared song, a small gift arcing through the sky. The clouds have parted completely, and a luminous moon hangs in the dark velvet of the sky. Its pale, gentle light spills into the world, transforming the familiar shapes of your garden into something ethereal and new. The leaves of the trees are edged in silver, and long, soft shadows stretch across the lawn. The house around you is completely still, enveloped in the deep and settled peace that follows the rain. The air that drifts through the slightly open window is cool and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. The old clock in the hall has fallen silent, resting in a quiet phase of its cycle. The only sound is the sound of your own breathing, a soft and steady rhythm in the tranquil dark. You can feel the gentle weight of the blanket over you, a comforting presence that anchors you to this moment of perfect rest. The coolness of the air is a soft touch on your skin. Your breathing is an easy, quiet tide, rising and falling without any effort at all. It is a moment of unblemished tranquility, a quiet culmination of a long and thoughtful day. Your gaze drifts past your own faint reflection in the window pane, out into the moon-drenched world beyond. You watch as a single downy seed drifts on the air, a tiny speck of silver caught in the moonlight before it disappears into the shadows. The world seems to be holding its breath, bathed in a light that feels both ancient and immediate. It is a light that soothes, a light that holds no questions, a light that simply is. Let the quiet settle around you, like warmth. This soft, silent light, falling on a peaceful world, calls forward a final, profound memory. It is not a sharp recollection, but a deep, resonant feeling, an echo across time. You remember another moon on a very different landscape, and the stillness that was finally found there. The present scene softens, its edges blurring, and you are with Julien as he stands his last watch of that long, quiet period. He remembered the moon just like this one, hanging luminous and high in the cold, clear air. It cast an ethereal light over the desolate expanse, transforming the scarred earth into a place of strange and solemn beauty. The pools of water in the shell craters gleamed like scattered silver coins. The churned mud took on the soft, sculpted quality of dark clay. Even the tangled nests of barbed wire, those brutal symbols of division, seemed somehow delicate now, like a spider web spun from moonlight and frost. You don't need to hold the memory sharply. Let it blur softly at the edges. It's not about remembering perfectly. It's about feeling the warmth of it. The world was utterly silent, a profound and ringing stillness that seemed to absorb all sound. And then, carried on the cold, clear air, came one last faint melody from across the way, a harmonica. It was not a sad tune, nor a happy one. It was simply a thread of human sound, a final, poignant whisper weaving its way through the immense quiet of the night. Standing there, leaning against the cold earth of the parapet, a sense of deep clarity settled over Julien. It was not a sudden thought, but a slow, quiet understanding that rose from deep within him. In his mind, he began to compose a letter to Elise, not with pen and paper, but with the pure substance of his feelings, a silent summation of all he had gathered in this place. He thought of the single, impossible poppy, its vibrant red a declaration of life against the chalky soil. He remembered the small, secret movements of the field mouse, a tiny, indifferent heartbeat in the corner of his dugout. He felt the memory of shared, lukewarm coffee with Mathieu in the fog, a communion that needed no words. He recalled the miraculous, spreading warmth of the dry wool socks she had sent, a tangible gift of love that had felt like salvation. And he heard again the haunting, unifying music from the other trench, a fragile bridge of shared humanity built of simple notes. He realized, with a quiet sense of revelation, that while the war was defined by its terrible noise and its violent, chaotic motion, he had been preserved by the spaces in between. He had built a life for himself, not on the grand, horrific events, but on the small, gentle moments. He had meticulously gathered these instances of beauty, of connection, of peace, and from them he had constructed a sanctuary inside himself. He had found his own internal line of stillness, a quiet strength that the outside world, no matter how brutal, could not breach. The memory ends there with that profound realization, as the first faint blush of dawn touched the eastern horizon, a soft gray promise of a new day. That feeling of profound peace, born in a moment of quiet revelation so long ago, settles over you now. It is not a memory of hardship, but a feeling of deep and lasting contentment. It is the warmth of a life preserved not by grand deeds, but by quiet observation. This gentle peace fills your chest and spreads slowly through your limbs, a soft, heavy warmth that melts away any remaining tension. The memories are not haunting specters. They are the solid foundations of the quiet person you became, the bedrock upon which a lifetime of resilience was built. They are not scars, but wisdom etched gently into the soul. The moonlit landscape of the past dissolves completely, leaving only the soft silver light on your own peaceful garden. The image of the distant dawn fades, and your awareness returns fully to the deep, comfortable darkness of your room. The air is cool on your skin. The blanket is a gentle weight. The profound quiet of the house is a comforting embrace. The story has been told. The memories have been visited, and they have settled back into their peaceful place, leaving behind only a feeling of wholeness, of a circle gently closed. There is nothing left to do now but rest. The journey is complete. Feel the gentle weight of relaxation settle deep into your bones, a feeling of coming home to yourself. The stillness you have been feeling is not just around you, it is within you too. It has always been there. Let your breathing be your anchor now. a soft, effortless rhythm guiding you down into deep, restorative sleep. Let go of the day. Let go of the story. There is only this moment of peace, this perfect quiet, and the gentle, welcoming call of your own deep rest. You are safe to drift now. You are safe to sleep.